Viktor Frankl is an author who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it had a huge influence on my life while I was going through the darkest days of my life. I was 20 years old. I was arrested when I was 23. I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, and I didn't know how I was going to make it through. Early in my journey, I read this book by Viktor Frankl called A Man's Search for Meaning, and it really had a huge influence on my adjustment inside. But I'm not alone. It's influenced the lives of millions of people and many people in prison. It's one of the reasons that I highly recommend it to people who are going into the prison system or in through the criminal justice system, because I think it helps them build hope. And one of the ways that I want to share with you what you can learn is I've asked some members of our community to read the book and then to write a book report about what they've learned from it. So let me go ahead and share with you a book report that I received from a young man who took us up on that opportunity. And so this is how it starts off. We invite members of our community to write book reports, and we received a report from Timothy Herman, who described his reaction to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And so with his permission, we published the report. I'm just going to read to you what he wrote, and then I will provide some commentary at the end of the presentation, because I want to give you a wide view of why this book can help you if you're going through a difficult time. So let's first of all look and listen what Timothy had to say about his reaction to the book. He said, "Why I read Man's Search for Meaning. I read Man's Search for Meaning a few weeks after I began serving a sentence of 6.5 years for a crime that I did not commit. I refused a plea deal, but lost at trial. I am a strong Christian, but I wanted to gain some insight from a non-Christian source. I needed more wisdom on the purpose of suffering injustice." Let me give you some comments on that right there, okay? You'll notice that I start off by asking people when they're writing these book reports to tell us why they read it. What I'd like you to do if you are going into this system, or if you have a loved one in this system and you're conveying this message to them, I'd like you to be asking them, I want you to think forward when you're sitting across the table from a parole officer or a probation officer or a case manager or somebody who has influence on your life. And you want to be able to tell them what you did during the darkest moments of your life and how you work to make amends or prepare for a better outcome. Book reports are a great way of doing that. And so I always ask the first question and said, why did you choose to read this particular book? And then I ask you to respond to a second question, which is, what did I learn from having read this book? So what I learned from reading Man's Search for Meaning. And rather than doing it in story form, he listed kind of some quotes and bullet points. And he said, I learned that suffering in and of itself is meaningless. I learned that we give our suffering meaning by the way we respond to it. I learned that the man whose self-esteem is always dependent on the respect of others is emotionally destroyed. I learned that there are 3 phases of an inmate's mental reaction to prison: the period following incarceration, the period of entrenched routine, and the period following release. People who are strong intellectually or spiritually are less likely to suffer damage to their inner self. And then 6, humor is one of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. Then he goes on to give some other quotes. The way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, the way he takes up his cross, gives him ample opportunity, even under the most difficult circumstances, to add deeper meaning to his life. It may remain brave, dignified, and unselfish. Or in the bitter fight for self-preservation, he may forget this human dignity and become no more than an animal. Here lies the chance for a man either to make use of it or to forego the opportunities of attaining the moral values that a difficult situation may afford him. And this decided whether he is worthy of his sufferings or not. Here's another quote. Instead of taking the concentration camp's difficulties as a test of the inner strength, they did not take their life seriously and despise it as something of no consequence. They preferred to close their eyes and live in the past. Life for such people became meaningless. The prisoner who lost faith in the future, his future, was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold. He let himself decline and became subject to mental and physical decay. Usually, this happened quite suddenly in the form of a crisis. It does not matter what we expect from life, but rather what life expects from us. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. So those are his responses. Let me give you a little bit of insight on another way of responding to that question. What did I learn from reading Man's Search for Meaning? I learned, that it's really important to be thinking about how can I recalibrate at any time. We all go through challenging times. We all go through struggles, and we all have to figure out our way through. The way that I recommend people think is don't only think about where I am today, think about what I want to become and how I'm going to get there. Who are the people I'm going to meet in the future, and what can I do to influence those people? If I'm in prison, I might want to be thinking about the case manager that has discretion on when I'm going to get out, or the person who runs the halfway house that will have discretion over my level of liberty later, or the probation officer that may allow me to travel or work independently, or so many other people that I've got to think about, including future employers or my family. All of those people, I may know them, I may not know them, but what can I do today to position myself to influence them later? If I can answer that question, I'm in a far better position to make it through this journey. That's when I start building a pathway on self-advocacy. And really, I learned that lesson from reading Viktor Frankl. So yes, suffering, it's hard to be in prison. It's hard to be away from the people you love and the people who love you. But if you can find a way to push through and advocate for yourself, you start to restore confidence, you feel better about yourself, and you can move forward. Okay? So and when you're writing a response to a question like, why did I read this book? Use it as a form to tell a story, to give a narrative, to describe what you're doing, because we're always telling stories. And if we don't tell those stories of what we've done to make ourselves better, the government's going to tell that story for us, for those people who are in prison. You're going to have a number, you're going to have a crime, you're going to have a criminal record. Figure out a way to overcome that, and you will empower yourself along the way. And so now I'm going to turn to the last stage of his response, and that's the third and final question, is how reading Man's Search for Meaning will contribute to my success upon release. And here's what he wrote. Reading Man's Search for Meaning helped to establish my purpose while I'm incarcerated. It was important that I not see this as wasted time, but instead it was a valuable lesson to prepare me for something more important. Preparations I am making for success. I have started writing a book, and I have prepared dozens of speeches or sermons which I will use as opportunities are presented. Well, my view on that is you can do a lot more by fleshing this out, okay? The more you give of who you are, of what you're thinking, of how something is influencing what you're doing during a time of challenge, the more you are going to inspire other people to believe in you. And it's very important that you build the support system, but you don't do it by just asking them to do something. You first have to give and show. And so if you're going into this situation, I would encourage you to follow the same path that this young man did of writing a book report, but don't be shy. Write as much as you want. If you want to write, 3-sentence answers, that's fine, but you could also write 3-paragraph answers or 3-page answers. And I think the more you give, the more ammunition you give, or rather the more, what's a better analogy here? Just the more you can nurture a person's ability to believe in you. And that's what's important. You've got to find ways to persuade other people to believe in you if you're going through this difficult time. That's what our team tries to show you. And I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. You'll see me doing it every day, including on making a video like this. My name is Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Prison Professors, and these are the strategies that got me through 26 years in prison. I believe they can help you as well. Thanks.